Leave now. James Harper's voice sliced through the glittering Chicago ballroom, silencing the clinking champagne glasses as he confronted a guest's cruel insult toward Talia Washington, a stunning black server whose presence stirred memories of a long-lost bond. Hey there, where are you tuning in from, Chicago, Atlanta, or somewhere across the globe? Drop your city in the comments below. What do you think happens when a billionaire recognizes his childhood best friend after 20 years, only to find their worlds couldn't be more different? Will love bridge the gap, or will time tear them apart? Subscribe and hit that notification bell to catch every twist in this heart-stirring tale. Stay with us. Can a single dance reignite a connection lost to decades and differences? Share your guesses below and join us for more stories of love defying all odds. The ballroom of the Drake Hotel in Chicago shimmered under a constellation of crystal chandeliers, each facet catching the golden glow of 1,000 lights. It was a scene of opulence, where champagne flutes clinked in delicate harmony, and laughter rose like bubbles in the warm September air. Emily Harper's wedding was the event of the season, a celebration of love wrapped in the trappings of wealth. Yet, for James Harper, the groom's billionaire older brother, the grandeur felt like a hollow echo. At 35, he stood alone, in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, his sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes drawing admiring glances he barely noticed. His cybersecurity empire, worth billions, had bought him everything: penthouse suites, private jets, the deference of strangers. But not the one thing he craved: connection. As he sipped his second bourbon, the ice clinking softly against the glass, he scanned the room, feeling the weight of his solitude press harder than ever. James leaned against a marble pillar, watching his younger sister Emily adjust her veil for what seemed the 100th time. Her nervous energy was endearing, a reminder of the family he'd fought to provide for after their parents' early deaths. He'd built his company from nothing, coding late into the night in a cramped apartment, driven by a promise to give Emily a life free of want. Now here she was, radiant and in love, while James stood on the sidelines, a spectator in his own life. The wedding planner, a wiry woman named Clara, darted through the crowd, barking orders at the catering staff with the precision of a drill sergeant. Everything had to be perfect, and it was, flawlessly so. Yet the perfection only deepened the ache in James's chest, a void no amount of money could fill. He swirled the bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light, and let his gaze drift across the ballroom. That's when he saw her. At first it was just a flicker, a woman moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, her black catering uniform crisp and unassuming. But there was something in the way she carried herself, a quiet grace that stood out amidst the chaos. Her long, glossy black hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, swaying gently as she navigated the sea of guests. James's breath caught, his fingers tightening around the glass. It couldn't be. His mind raced, pulling him back to a humid Chicago, summer 20 years ago, to a tire swing creaking under an oak tree, to a girl who knew him better than he knew himself, Talia Washington. The name hit him like a thunderbolt. She was 12 again, her laughter bright as she pushed him on that swing, her warm brown eyes sparkling with mischief as they shared secrets over stolen popsicles. Talia had been his anchor, his best friend, the one who stood between him and the neighborhood bullies who mocked his threadbare clothes. They were inseparable, two kids from a working-class block where dreams felt bigger than the world would allow. She'd promised to write when her family moved to Atlanta, driven away by debts and a landlord's eviction notice. They'd tried, scribbled letters, a few emails, but life had a way of pulling them apart. The last letter came when he was 15, her handwriting shaky, apologizing for the silence. Then, nothing. For 20 years, James had carried her absence like a bruise, tender and ever-present. Now, here she was, serving drinks at his sister's wedding. The irony twisted. In his gut, the boy who'd once shared his lunch money with her was now a billionaire, while Talia moved through the room, invisible to the elite guests who barely acknowledged her. His heart pounded as she turned, her profile sharp and unmistakable. Those high cheekbones, the gentle curve of her lips, Time hadn't dulled her beauty, only deepened it. She was breathtaking, her dark skin glowing under the soft lights, her movements deliberate yet effortless. James's hands trembled, the bourbon nearly slipping from his grasp. He wanted to call out, to cross the room and pull her into his arms, but doubt rooted him to the spot. Would she even remember him? Then it happened. A middle-aged guest, Charles Benton, a pompous real estate mogul with a flushed face and a sneer, grabbed a flute from Talia's tray. "You don't belong in a place like this," he slurred, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "Stick to where you're from." The words landed like a slap, and Talia's shoulders stiffened, her professional smile faltering for a fraction of a second. The room seemed to hold its breath, the chatter dimming as eyes darted toward the scene. James's blood boiled, a protective instinct surging from a place he hadn't tapped in years. He set his glass down with a clink and strode forward, his presence commanding silence. "Leave now," James said, his voice low and cold, cutting through the tension like a blade. Charles blinked, startled, as if noticing James for the first time. "This is my sister's wedding and you're done here." He nodded to security, two burly men in black suits who materialized at his side. Charles sputtered, his face reddening, but the guards escorted him out before he could protest further. The crowd resumed its hum, but James's eyes were locked on Talia. She adjusted her tray, her composure regained, and offered a small, grateful nod. But there was something else in her gaze. Recognition, faint but undeniable. Their eyes met, and for a moment the ballroom faded. It was just them, James and Talia, two kids under an oak tree, 20 years erased in a heartbeat. She turned back to her work, her ponytail swaying as she moved to the next guest. James stood frozen, his pulse racing. How could she be here after all this time? What had her life become? The questions churned, each one pulling him deeper into the past. He remembered the day she left, her tear-streaked face pressed against the car window as her mother drove away. He'd stood on the curb, clutching the gold ring her grandmother had given him to keep safe, a promise she'd made with a trembling voice. "So I won't lose it when we move." He still carried it, tucked in his wallet, a piece of her he couldn't let go. As Clara barked another order, Talia glanced back, their eyes meeting again. This time there was no mistaking it. She knew him. James's heart leapt, but fear followed. What could he say after 20 years? "Hey, Talia, remember the kid who followed you everywhere?" The thought felt absurd, yet he couldn't let her slip away again. The band began to play, a soft melody filling the air, and James felt a pull, a chance to bridge the gap. But, for now, he watched, the weight of their shared past anchoring him to the spot, knowing this moment was only the beginning. The ballroom pulsed with the rhythm of celebration, the clatter of silverware, and the hum of conversation weaving a tapestry of joy for Emily Harper's wedding. Yet, for James Harper, the world had narrowed to a single point. Talia Washington moving through the crowd with her tray of champagne flutes, her long black ponytail swaying like a metronome. The confrontation with Charles Benton had left a charged silence in its wake, and James's heart still thundered from the surge of protectiveness that had propelled him across the room. He stood by the marble pillar, his bourbon abandoned, watching Talia navigate the sea of guests with a grace that belied the weight of her role. She was here, after 20 years, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. He needed to speak to her, to bridge the chasm of time, but his polished billionaire confidence faltered at the thought of facing the girl who'd once known every corner of his soul. Talia's eyes flicked toward him again, a fleeting glance that carried the weight of recognition. James felt it like a jolt, a spark that threatened to ignite memories he'd buried deep. He pushed off the pillar, his polished loafers silent on the gleaming floor, and wove through the crowd, dodging a tipsy aunt and a cluster of laughing groomsmen. Talia was near the dessert table now, arranging napkins with meticulous care, her movements precise but tense. As he approached, the wedding planner, Clara, shot Talia a sharp look from across the room, her lips pursed in warning. Talia's shoulders stiffened, and she adjusted her tray, her professional mask firmly in place. James hesitated, the distance between them no longer just physical, but a gulf carved by years and circumstance. "Talia?" His voice was softer than he intended, barely audible over the band's swelling notes. She turned, her brown eyes wide with a mix of shock and wariness. The tray wobbled in her hands, and she steadied it with a practiced grip. "It's James Harper." The words felt inadequate, a clumsy attempt to summon a past that seemed both vivid and unreachable. Her lips parted, and for a moment he saw the girl from their Chicago neighborhood, the one who'd laughed with him over comic books and patched his scraped knees. "James," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Is it you?" He nodded, his throat tight. "It's been 20 years. The number hung between them, heavy with the weight of lost letters and unanswered questions. Talia's gaze darted to Clara, who was now barking orders at a waiter nearby, then back to James. "I can't talk long," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "I'm working." The words stung, a reminder of the divide between his tailored tuxedo and her catering uniform. He was a billionaire, a guest in this world of opulence. She was laboring to keep it running, yet her eyes held a warmth that pierced through the formality, a flicker of the Talia who'd once been his haven. I couldn't believe it was you," James said, stepping closer, his hands fidgeting at his sides. He wanted to say more, to ask why she'd stopped writing, where life had taken her, how she'd ended up here, but the words tangled in his chest. Talia's smile was tight, professional, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. "You look different," she said, her gaze flickering over his suit, the polished watch glinting at his wrist. "Different." The word carried a subtle edge, not accusation, but observation. He wasn't the scrawny kid she'd protected from bullies anymore. He was a man who belonged in this glittering world, while she balanced a tray and a precarious livelihood. The band shifted into a slow, soulful melody, a cover of Etta James's "At Last," and the dance floor filled with couples swaying. Under the chandeliers, James's heart raced, an impulse seizing him. "Dance with me, Talia," he said, extending his hand before he could second-guess himself. Her eyes widened, and she glanced at her uniform, the tray, the guests who might notice. "James, I can't," she said, her voice low, almost pleading. "I'm working, they'll see." But he didn't move, his hand steady, his eyes locked on hers. "Just one dance," he urged, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "For old time's sake." Talia hesitated, her fingers tightening on the tray. Clara was distracted, scolding a busboy across the room, and the other guests were lost in their own worlds. Something shifted in Talia's expression, a flicker of the girl who'd once dared him to climb the oak tree higher than he thought possible. She set the tray on a nearby table, her movements deliberate, and took his hand. Her touch was electric, small and warm, exactly as he remembered from their childhood. As they stepped onto the dance floor, the world blurred. The chandeliers, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all fading until it was just them. James guided her gently, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. She felt right, like a piece of his life clicking back into place. Talia's initial stiffness softened as they swayed, her breath steadying against his shoulder. "This is crazy," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the music. "I'm in a uniform, James." He smiled, a real one, not the polished grin he used in boardrooms. "You're still you," he said. "That's all I see." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the 20 years between them dissolved. They were kids again, sneaking into her grandmother's attic to read old novels, whispering dreams under a summer sky. But the song ended too soon, and reality crashed back. Talia pulled away, her professional mask slipping back into place as Clara's sharp gaze found her. "I have to get back," she said, stepping back, her hand lingering in his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. James nodded, his chest tight with the urge to keep her there, to talk until dawn like they used to. Can we talk later? He asked, his voice raw. Talia hesitated, then nodded, a small, cautious gesture. After my shift, she said, grabbing her tray and disappearing into the crowd. James watched her go, his hand still warm from her touch. The ballroom buzzed around him, but he felt anchored, tethered to a past he thought he'd lost. Talia was here, and though the years had changed them, the spark of their connection hadn't dimmed. As he returned to his pillar, the music swelling once more, he knew this awkward reunion was only the beginning of something he couldn't yet name, but he wasn't letting her slip away again. The ballroom's golden glow faded as James Harper stepped into the cool September night, the hum of Emily's wedding now a distant murmur behind the heavy glass doors of the Drake Hotel. The hotel's gardens stretched before him, a labyrinth of manicured hedges and twinkling fairy lights, their soft radiance mirrored by the stars above. His heart still thrummed from the dance with Talia Washington, her touch lingering like a melody he couldn't shake. He'd convinced her to meet him here after her shift ended at 11 p.m., a plea born of desperation to hold on to the fragile thread of their reunion. Now, as the clock neared midnight, he paced the stone path, his polished loafers scuffing softly against the gravel, his breath visible in the crisp air. Would she come, or would the weight of their 20-year separation keep her away? Talia emerged from a side entrance, her catering uniform replaced by a simple navy sweater and jeans, her long black hair still neatly tied in a ponytail. She looked smaller without the tray, more vulnerable, yet her stride carried the same quiet strength he'd always admired. "You didn't have to wait," she said, her voice soft but edged with caution as she approached. Her brown eyes caught starlight, and James felt a pang, remembering how those eyes once held all his secrets. "I wanted to," he replied, gesturing to a wrought iron bench nestled beneath a willow tree. "Just to talk, like we used to." She hesitated, then sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The garden was quiet, save for the distant trickle of a fountain and the occasional rustle of leaves. James sat beside her, leaving a careful distance, though every fiber of him wanted to close it. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of unspoken questions. "This place," Talia said, glancing at the twinkling lights. "It's a far cry from our old block, isn't it?" Her smile was faint, tinged with something bittersweet. James nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, but you're still you, Talia. That hasn't changed." Her laugh was soft, almost self-conscious. "You don't know that, James. 20 years is a long time." She looked away, her gaze settling on the stars, and he saw the weight she carried. Lines of exhaustion around her eyes, a guardedness that hadn't existed in the girl who'd once dared him to chase fireflies. He wanted to ask everything, where she'd been, what had happened, why the letters stopped. But he started small. "Tell me about your life," he said, his voice gentle, an invitation rather than a demand. Talia exhaled, her breath a faint cloud in the night air. "It's not a fairy tale," she warned, but she began. She was a single mother to Malik, her 12-year-old son, a bright kid with her eyes and a stubborn streak to match. She'd raised him alone since his father left when she learned she was pregnant, a betrayal that had hardened her resolve. She worked as a middle school history teacher, pouring her heart into her students, but the pay barely covered rent, so she took catering gigs on weekends. "It's exhausting," she admitted, her voice raw. "But Malik, he's my everything. Every late night, every double shift, it's for him." Her pride was fierce, but James caught the tremor of fatigue. Beneath it, a woman stretched thin but unyielding. He listened, his chest aching as her words painted a life of struggle and resilience. He saw her in his mind's eye, juggling lesson plans and catering trays, cheering at Malik's basketball games, all while carrying the weight of a world that hadn't been kind. "You're incredible," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Talia's eyes flicked to his, wary but softening. "I'm just surviving," she said. "What about you, James? The suits, the watches? You made it." Her tone held no envy, only a quiet acknowledgement of the chasm between them. James leaned back, the bench creaking under his weight. How could he explain the hollowness of his success? The penthouse with its cold marble floors, the boardroom, victories that left him staring at the Chicago skyline, alone. "I built what I thought I wanted," he said finally, his voice low. "The company, the money, it was all for Emily, for the family we lost. But it's empty, Talia. Every deal, every zero in my bank account. It doesn't mean anything. Without someone to share it with." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I never stopped missing you." The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Talia's fingers tightened in her lap, her gaze dropping to the gravel path. "We were kids, James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Life got in the way. My mom, we were drowning after the move. No money, no stability. I wanted to write, but it was too much." Her words carried the weight of old guilt, and James felt a pang, remembering the boy who'd waited for letters that never came. "I kept your grandmother's ring," he said, patting his pocket where his wallet held the gold band. "Always. Have." Talia's breath caught, her eyes glistening as she looked at him. "You kept it?" she asked, her voice breaking. He nodded, and for a moment, the years seemed to shrink, the garden transforming into the backyard where they'd shared dreams. They talked on, the hours slipping away, reminiscing about sneaking into her grandmother's attic, laughing over their failed attempt to build a treehouse. But the present kept intruding. Talia's exhaustion, James's loneliness, the unspoken question of what this reunion could mean. As the clock neared 3 a.m., the air grew colder, and Talia shivered. James shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. "You don't have to do that," she said, but she pulled it closer, the scent of his cologne mingling with the night air. "I want to," he said, his voice steady. "I don't want you to disappear again." She looked at him, her eyes a mix of hope and fear. "This is complicated, James," she said. "We're not those kids anymore." He nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. "Maybe not. But I'm not ready to let you go." They stood, the garden silent now, the fairy lights casting long shadows. As Talia handed back his jacket, her fingers brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent a spark through him. "I need to get home," she said, her voice soft. "Malik's with a sitter." James nodded, walking her to the edge of the garden. "Can I see you again?" he asked, his voice raw. She hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe. We'll see." As she walked away, her silhouette fading into the night, James felt a flicker of hope, a fragile bridge to a past he wasn't ready to lose again. The Chicago dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and violet as James Harper pulled his sleek black sedan into the cracked parking lot of Lila's Diner, 3 days after his reunion with Talia Washington at the Drake Hotel. The neon sign flickered, its red glow casting a nostalgic spell over the faded brick facade, unchanged since their childhood summers. James's heart raced, not with the adrenaline of a boardroom deal, but with a nervous hope he hadn't felt since he was 12, clutching Talia's hand as they ran from imaginary monsters. Tonight was their first date, a deliberate return. To the place where they'd once pooled nickels for burgers and milkshakes. He glanced at the passenger seat, where a small bouquet of daisies and sunflowers lay, their wild beauty a nod to the flowers Talia used to weave into crowns behind her grandmother's house. Would she remember? Would this mean as much to her as it did to him? James stepped out, smoothing his navy sweater. No suit tonight, just jeans and a quiet determination to bridge the 20 years between them. The diner's bell jingled as he entered, the scent of fries and coffee wrapping around him like a warm memory. Talia was already there, seated in their old booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl they'd claimed as kids. She wore a simple, green dress, her long black hair loose now, cascading over her shoulders. Her smile, tentative but genuine, hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You're early," she said, her voice teasing, a hint of the girl who'd once dared him to eat a spoonful of mustard for a quarter. "You're one to talk." James shot back, sliding into the booth across from her. He set the bouquet on the table, watching her eyes widen as she touched the petals. "Daisies and sunflowers," she whispered, her fingers tracing a sunflower's edge. "You remembered." Her voice trembled, and James saw a flicker of tears before she blinked them away. "How could I forget?" he said softly. "You used to make those crowns and act like you ruled the neighborhood." Talia laughed, a sound so familiar it tugged at his heart, crinkling her eyes the way it always had. The diner, with its chipped Formica tables and jukebox humming an old Motown tune, felt like a time machine, stripping away the years and their differences. They ordered cheeseburgers, fries, and a chocolate milkshake to share, just like old times. As they talked, the conversation flowed easily, weaving through memories of sneaking into matinee movies and plotting pranks on grumpy Mr. Jenkins next door. But the present crept in too. Talia spoke of her son, Malik, with a fierce pride that made her glow. "He's 12, stubborn as anything, but so smart," she said, her smile softening. "He's into coding now. Spends hours on this app you probably know." James grinned, recognizing the app, one his company had developed for schools. "Small world," he said, and Talia's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Too small sometimes." Bandisa. Food arrived, steaming and nostalgic, but James barely tasted it, too caught up in Talia's presence. She was different now, stronger, more guarded, shaped by years of raising Malik alone and juggling jobs. Yet beneath the weight she carried, he saw the girl who'd been his everything, the one who'd taught him to dream bigger than their block. "You've done so much," he said, his voice low. "Malik's lucky to have you." Talia shook, her head dipping a fry in ketchup. "I'm the lucky one. He keeps me going." Her honesty, raw and unguarded, made James's chest ache. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to do it alone anymore, but the words felt too big, too soon. Later, at Talia's modest apartment, James met Malik. The boy stood in the doorway, his lanky frame and wary brown eyes, so like his mother's, sizing. "James up. You're the guy from the wedding?" Malik asked, his tone protective, arms crossed. Talia rested a hand on his shoulder, her touch calming. "This is James, my old friend," she said, the pause heavy with meaning. James crouched to Malik's level, offering a smile. "Heard you're into coding. Ever mess with my company's app, CodeSpark?" Malik's eyes lit up, his guard dropping. "That's yours? I built a game level on it last week." James laughed, the tension easing. "Show me." They moved to the porch, the evening air cool as Malik pulled out his tablet, eagerly showing James his game, a clunky but creative maze. James offered pointers, his tech mogul expertise tempered by genuine interest. Malik's skepticism melted into excitement, and they debated coding tricks and basketball stats, Malik's favorite player sparking a playful argument. Talia watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, a cautious hope softening her features. James caught her gaze, and for a moment the world was just the three of them, him, Talia, and the boy who was her heart. He saw himself in Malik's guarded trust. The kid he'd been before life and loss hardened him. As the night deepened, Malik yawned, and Talia sent him to bed with a kiss on his forehead. She joined James on the porch steps, the street quiet, save for the hum of distant traffic. "He likes you," she said, her voice soft but surprised. "He doesn't warm up to people easily." James smiled, his heart swelling. "He's a good kid like his mom." Talia looked away, her fingers twisting together. Us. It's a lot, James. I don't know what it means." Her vulnerability was a gift, one he didn't take lightly. "It means we're figuring it out," he said, his voice steady. "Together." They sat in comfortable silence, the stars above mirroring the fairy lights from their garden talk. James felt a shift, a new bond forming, not just with Talia, but with the life she'd built. As he drove home later, the bouquet's scent lingering in his car, he knew this was more than nostalgia. It was a chance to rebuild something real, Something that could hold Talia, Malik, and him together, if only they could navigate the weight of their different worlds. The familiar jingle of Lila's diner bell rang out as James Harper pushed open the door, the scent of sizzling burgers and brewed coffee wrapping around him like a warm embrace. 6 months had passed since his first date with Talia Washington in this very booth, and the cracked red vinyl and flickering neon sign had become a sanctuary, a place where their past and present intertwined. Tonight, the diner buzzed with its usual evening crowd, truckers nursing coffee, teenagers giggling over milkshakes, but James's world narrowed to the booth where Talia sat, laughing at something her 12-year-old son, Malik, was saying. Her green dress hugged her frame, her long black hair cascaded freely, and her smile, unguarded and radiant, lit a fire in James's chest. He'd built a billion-dollar empire, but this moment, watching Talia and Malik, feeling like he belonged, held a wealth no money could buy. James slid into the booth, his heart pounding with a certainty he hadn't felt since he was a boy, promising Talia forever under a Chicago oak tree. Malik was showing him a school project, a hand-drawn comic about a coder saving the world, his animated chatter filling the air. "Check this out, James, my hero hacks a robot army." Malik's eyes, so like Talia's, sparkled with pride. James grinned, ruffling the boy's hair. "Kid, you're gonna outcode me one day." Talia's laugh, bright and crinkling her eyes, sent a jolt through him. It was now or never. The weight of the gold ring in his wallet, the one Talia's grandmother had entrusted to him 20 years ago, pressed against his thigh, a promise kept through decades of absence. He'd carried that ring since Talia's family moved to Atlanta, a simple gold band she'd given him with trembling hands, saying to keep it safe so I won't lose it. Through every milestone, his first startup, his first million, his sister Emily's wedding, he'd kept it close, a piece of Talia he couldn't let go. Now, as the jukebox switched to a soulful Aretha Franklin tune, James felt the moment crystallize. He couldn't spend another day without her, without Malik, without the family he'd found in them. His hand trembled as he reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the worn leather of his wallet. Talia's laughter faded as she caught his expression, her brow furrowing. "James, you okay?" The diner's hum seemed to quiet, the clatter of plates and chatter of patrons fading as James slid out of the booth and knelt beside the table. The worn linoleum was cool against his knee, but his focus was on Talia, her brown eyes wide with shock. Malik's mouth dropped open, his comic, forgotten. "Talia," James began, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "I loved you when we were kids, sneaking into your grandma's attic, dreaming under that oak tree. I loved you through 20 years of missing you, every day wondering where you were. And I want to love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me." He opened his wallet, pulling out the gold ring, its surface catching the diner's neon glow. Talia's breath hitched, her hand flying to her mouth. "You kept it," she whispered, tears welling as she recognized her grandmother's ring, the one she'd thought lost forever. The diner went silent, waitresses pausing mid-step, patrons craning to see. "Talia Washington," James continued, his voice raw. "Will you marry me? Will you and Malik let me be part of your family?" Malik's eyes darted between them, a grin breaking through his shock. Talia's tears spilled over, her hand trembling as she reached for him. "Yes, James," she sobbed, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, of course." She threw her arms around his neck and the diner erupted in cheers. A trucker whooping from the counter, a waitress clapping. Malik leapt from the booth, wrapping his arms around them both, his voice muffled against James's shoulder. "You're gonna be my dad, right?" he asked, half laughing, half crying. James pulled him close, his own eyes stinging. "If you'll have me, kid." The ring slid onto Talia's finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been waiting for this. Mint. A year later, the Drake Hotel ballroom gleamed once more, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over a new celebration. Talia walked down the aisle, radiant in a simple ivory gown that hugged her curves, her hair adorned with a single daisy, a nod to their childhood. Malik, in a small tuxedo, stood proudly at her side, His chest puffed as he gave her away. James waited at the altar, his heart full, his navy suit a quiet contrast to the opulence around them. Emily, now a beaming sister-in-law, dabbed tears from the front row, whispering to her husband about how James had finally found his home. As Talia reached him, her hand slipping into his, James saw the girl who'd saved him from bullies, the woman who'd rebuilt his world. Their vows were simple, promises of love and partnership forged in shared memories and hard-won trust. When they kissed, the applause was deafening, but James heard only the beat of his own heart, synced with hers. At the reception, they danced. Under the same chandeliers where they'd reconnected, Talia's gown swirling as James spun her, Malik cutting in with a grin to steal a dance with his mom. Later, as the band played a slow song, James held Talia close, her warmth anchoring him. "I was scared," she murmured against his chest, "that we couldn't bridge our worlds." James tightened his arms around her. "You are my world," he said, his voice low. "You and Malik." She smiled, her eyes crinkling, and he knew. This was what happiness felt like. Not his billions, not his empire, but this moment, this family. As Malik joined them, tugging James toward the dessert table, James realized the greatest treasure wasn't built or earned. It was Talia, walking back into his life, and Malik, who'd become his son in every way that mattered. Under the ballroom's golden light, they were home, and James would never let them go. What an incredible journey for James and Talia, reuniting after 20 years to find love that time couldn't break. What did you think of their story? Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past who changed your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. A huge thank you for joining us on this heartfelt ride. If this tale of second chances touched you, smash that like button, share it with someone who believes in love's power, and subscribe with that notification bell to never miss our latest stories. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep believing in love that defies all odds. We'll see you in the next video.